5 minutes really for me on some technical issues to think about that might help to inform the discussion and the debate. I think probably one of the first observations from what we've heard so far is that there are many and diverse models here, aren't there? And that's a good thing, I think, because obviously the models have been crafted to suit local circumstances. And in some cases, community libraries operating through new models have been around for some time before the financial imperative came along. So they're an interesting model to look at, and maybe other models are emerging in response to financial imperative and cuts. So we need to be aware of the origins and the circumstances. Looking at different models, I really want to draw upon this research that the Arts Council and Locality did, and thank them for this taxonomy really of different forms of community library. I think reading the research, it seems that they found that there were 425 community libraries, and they broke down into these different categories here. So over on the left here, you've got the sort of non-public sector involvement, standalone, either asset owning or non-asset owning libraries. Perhaps in the case of the asset owning, there's been a community asset transfer of premises. Over on the right hand side though, you've got these co-produced libraries, and that makes up 95% of the sample, so they are by far the biggest category as it stands at the moment. And then they break down further into community managed libraries, so with some form of ongoing local authority support, perhaps with the book stock, the terminals and so on, some professional support. Over on this side of the spectrum though, completely standalone if you like, commissioned and paid for through a contract and delivered perhaps by a charity or a social enterprise or even a private sector partner. And I think this comes absolutely to sustainability, doesn't it, on the right here, that you would need some form of contract there to guarantee sustainability if you're operating completely on an arm's length model like that. It's interesting as well to look at the role of volunteers. Some research by SIPFA found that there are currently 21,000 people volunteering in England's libraries at the moment, so that's a staggering number of supporters. So, if we were looking at legal models for some form of community involvement or arm's length model, there are a variety of legal formats that could be used, and some of those have been mentioned already by some of our speakers. This slide is a gross oversimplification that just serves to illustrate some of the features, if you like. Looking at the first model, a company limited by guarantee, that could be charitable or it could be non-charitable. The thing about having the charitable status is that might open the door to some rate relief around business rates, so that might be a cost saving to take into account. But of course, with all of these models, you're balancing the ability perhaps to have an asset lock in place, which might be something that the council or the host authority is particularly concerned about when handing over some community assets to an arm's length organisation. Or indeed the ability to generate external investment, which might be appropriate in some cases. It's more difficult if you're using a charitable model. I'm interested to hear the perspectives of those who are operating through the charitable industrial and providence societies, for example, about that particular aspect. So a wide variety of models that could possibly be used. We haven't got time to go into those in great detail now, but if anyone wants to come back to that, we can. Some other questions then that I just want to leave you with really around sustainability. These are, I think, some of the key factors that would have to be considered in looking at these models. So governance arrangements is obviously very important from the point of view of both giving comfort to the host authority that may be letting go of assets and a service, but also in terms of how you make the operation work in a viable way going forwards. Security of income streams, so that might be through a contract, or it might be through a service level agreement or some form of grant funding. Absolute clarity, I think, about the operational aspects and running costs. It'd be very interesting to hear more from Darren about the challenges of taking on buildings from the council, which presumably had some historic underfunding of physical condition and so on at the time you took them on. And then I think another key area is planning for technological change. You know, we're obviously in a very changing environment here, aren't we? If we're moving towards more digital services, where is the investment going to come from in order to make that transition? I was just talking to Darren about his plan for a mobile van which will have internet access. And obviously one of the challenges is going to be tapping into the fast broadband network in order to make that service work. And then income streams, co-location, you know, to what extent can we bring other occupiers and other activities onto the site, and on what terms? And that's been a very interesting question, I think, that people will have different perspectives on in terms of what happens on the ground. Just very quickly, just to give you a bit of background, I'm sure many of you will know this already, but the sort of statutory underpinning to this area is in this 1964 piece of legislation, which places a duty on every library authority to ensure comprehensive and efficient library service for all persons. Interestingly, it then goes on to say that in providing the stocks, that they can do that by making arrangements with other authorities or by any other appropriate means. So that, in a way, opens up quite a blank canvas for different forms of cooperation and different models and so on. Interesting that gramophone records are still written in there as one of the assets and resources to be made available. And there are some other legal issues and challenges just to draw your attention to. I won't go into those in detail now. I suppose the Qualities Act duties is very important in terms of the way in which you set the service up. It has to be accessible to all different groups. And we've got the new community rights in the Localism Act and also the Public Services Social Value Act, which now are in force and could potentially apply to these services. And that might be a way of generating interest from community groups to take on new services, or indeed structuring procurement processes in a different way to capture social value from that procurement. So I'll leave it at that. That's a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that will provide some food for thought in the discussion.